there is a certain anticipation in the air. One of the few feasts that we have is actually given the date thereof in Scripture, at least the countdown. Ascension Day, 40 days, a perfect number. And here we have a gospel preparing for it. With the British Commission might have the possibility of keeping the old date for these feasts which move around and put on Sundays, because in the monastic life that's how it's done. One is there to pray and there's no need to curtail things. So in the Hermitage and here, notice, and here, there will be Ascension Thursday. And therefore, because there's no, as long as there's a funeral anyway, there will be no obstacle to having it at 11 o'clock this Thursday morning, coming for Ascension Day, the real day according to Scripture. Bear that in mind. Now, the Gospel is giving a promise. It's also giving a teaching about the power of praying in His name. I want to dwell on that for a moment for two reasons. There's a link with the first reading from the Epistle of St. James about the use we make of words. If anyone thinks himself to be religious, not restraining his tongue, notice, not restraining his tongue, but deceiving his own heart, that man's religion is vain. Now let's look at this organ that we call the tongue. If a person can't hear, he can't speak either, for the simple reason that he can't reproduce the sounds he's never heard. And I have a friend in Italy who was very severely deaf from birth. They managed to get through in some shape or form and teach him sounds, but it was very, very difficult to make out what he was saying. Very intelligent, but communication was blocked. You could just about intuit what he was trying to say. And he would speak to you, sometimes holding your voice box, because they're trained to actually pick up vibrations and read lips. And if I wasn't looking in his face, he couldn't see what I was saying. I had to articulate loud. We forget the privilege that we have sometimes, and when one is encountering something like that, one sees. I had also a friend who was blind, and that too was a world of its own, a world of darkness. But boy, did he have a good memory. One syllable, he knew exactly who was there. Not a thing he'd forget. They live in their own world, but it's a full world, and they're very sensitive to friendship because they're cast aside. And St. James, in that same vein, would talk of the importance of not forgetting these people who were classed and put aside, visiting the orphans. They, in those days, were in serious trouble. There was no welfare system. So, with regard to the word, cultivate it. Matthew chapter 12, verse 36 gives us this teaching that we will have to answer for every idle word. What are idle words? Gossip. It's interesting, isn't it? We comport bits of news, often half true. It makes good conversation at somebody else's expense. It's even more serious if it's not true. But already, the very fact of carrying on the process of denigrating somebody is not good. Actually, there's a holy form of that. I think you know what it is. To do the same with regard to priests, bishops, and upwards. It's not good use of conversation. 1, therefore, gossip. Untruth. Now, remember, all lies are a participation in the fundamental sin of the father of lies. There's no good lie. Having said that, there are situations when a person has not the right to the truth. E.g., if I come out of that box this afternoon and and somebody asks me about something and I've learned something in confession, well, that knowledge doesn't exist on the human level. It's knowledge from God. It's God's knowledge, and therefore it's as though it didn't exist, and one can never ever say things learned in confession. Another example would be, you have a situation in a communist country. They're coming in to look for the priest. I remember hearing this years ago in France. You avoid direct, head-on sins of untruth because their participation in the sin of the father of lies. So one can use this principle. If you have to avoid getting into a situation where the person hasn't a right to the truth. Remember in French it was le voleur n'est pas ici, the thief is not here. And in the process one is actually holding one's hands in one's sleeves. And one is making this mental reserve, he's not in my sleeves. You see, it's always a bit sort of funny when put to the extreme, but actually it's a principle which does avoid the fullness of a formal sin of untruth. One is attaching another meaning, but it gets you out of some situations which can be dangerous. You can't say the priest is actually in that hidey hole. Other things of the sins of the tongue. The Latin is non refrainans, not refraining, not harnessing in, breaking in the tongue. Well, temper. A mature person obtains authority without losing dignity. I remember doing teacher training there for young children eventually in Bangor. We were told certain things. We were never to go to the top, never to lose dignity, never strike a child, but there are ways and means of obtaining authority without losing dignity or especially control. Up to the maximum, one has lost the victory already. The mother who can look straight at the child and obtain order just by this is far more powerful than the one who has to shout and scream. And by the way, you fathers of families here, don't abdicate. The mother has to have that last call of appeal, Dad, before whom the whole universe must tremble. If he doesn't do that, he's soft. He's not doing what he should be as a dad. With regard to what we do amongst each other, we don't have to engage with every conversation in such a way that we lose peace over it. Now, observe a conversation. It's starting to get heated. You're losing your peace. Perhaps you're losing control. Or perhaps you lose a friend. You don't have to engage with every point. To go through life and navigate in peace, one has to know how to let go of certain things. Everything hasn't the same importance. But there is worse, and that's why I'm coming into this now. It's bringing God into the equation. Now let's see what's going on there. We have just received the Lord by presenting our tongue as the throne of glory for the King of Kings and our judge. And sometime later in the day, we're getting somewhat frustrated, and so we go to the maximum that we know. We bring in what? The holy name. God. It's the only way we can vent our fury and actually become cool if we're young. We have to be like others. Are we cool at our judgment when we stand before the King of Kings, who opens the book of life and reads out to us all the bad words that he heard and we forgot? You know, at death, we see it all. The whole video is played before us. Not an idle word is forgotten. It's all stuff to be handed on to purgatory, and not before then do we get to glory. But then, there is also the vulgar, losing dignity because bringing into conversation what is really God's, but made the devil's. He's claimed a certain realm of life for himself, and it's lost its sacrality. side of life, which should be holy. You look at a man, he changes personality when he goes from one context to the other. He's one thing in the pub, he's another in church. And he secretly knows it. Why? He might tell his children not to use that word, which he's just been using the previous night in the pub. A split personality. Let's be in control of this and not controlled by our moods. Some are called to use this faculty to preach and to act in the person of Christ, and at that point his tongue becomes that of Jesus himself. He borrows his vocal cords. They should be completely separated from anything profane, vulgar, or anything to do with swearing, taking God into the equation. I want, before I finish, to ask you to be aware of the issue of taking for granted too much the faculties that you have. I mentioned sight, I mentioned speech, I mentioned hearing. There are others too. Walking. Just the other day, I went to anoint two dear friends who happened to be in the same hospital, one of the largest ones in Ireland, St. James in Dublin. And one was a dear priest who actually you know. He comes here, not long ordained. He's going to survive, but he's very frustrated, I can see, because he can't do anything except pray in bed. And it hit me there what it is to be bearing in one's person all the power of the Blessed Trinity on earth and not able to exercise it, at least for the moment. Near where I go every year in Italy, it was an area where communism was actually quite strong, that part of Tuscany, and there was violence. Down the road, some years ago, when it was at the heart of communism, which was a threat to Italy, a young priest had just been ordained, and he was shot. All his priesthood went up in one bullet. But there are other situations too, and this one made me nearly cry. I looked for the ICU, because I knew she was there. A young travelling lassie, young and pretty, and a friend. She was there, she opened her eyes and smiled. What can I do? First, they'd taken a toe, then, a few years ago, a leg, and just the other day, the other leg was about to be sawn off. It was going to be 8 hours because it was a full amputation. At the last minute they decided that maybe her body couldn't take it because it reacted very badly the previous time, organ shutting down, so they went as far as the knee for the time being. And I came home. When they were operating, I wrote this, which I'll give to you afterwards, to remind you, before you complain about the pain here and there in your body, that you need to be grateful for the pains you haven't got and the faculties that you have. The other, what I wrote to my dear friend, whom you know, reminding also you here what a priest is, and what you young people might have in your being if you consent, because in these vocational situations, it depends to a large extent on your openness. 1 in 3, said St. John Bosco, was potentially called, but it's like nature, the seed just doesn't take. But it could! Think about it. I just finish with a reminder. It's only just over a century since this scenario took place. The other day, a wounded soldier was brought into hospital, and it was found necessary to amputate his right thumb. It was impossible to administer an anaesthetic, yet the wounded man bore the operation without a groan. When all was over and the surgeon was about to pass on to the next case, the soldier burst into sobs. "What?" said the surgeon kindly. "You did not even wince under the knife. And now, when it is all over, you are crying. That's not the reason. I am a priest. And amputation means that I can never say